Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
We've all been there. You get this sudden rush of motivation. Maybe it was this morning, maybe it was last New Year's, and you decide, okay, something has to change. You set a very clear intention.
But an intention is a strange thing, isn't it? It feels so solid in the moment. But the gap between having that thought and actually, changing your behavior day after day, that's where everything happens or doesn't happen.
Right. The real struggle isn't deciding to change. It's following through when you're tired or stressed or tempted. So why can some people just do it? They connect the goal to the action, while for so many others, that connection just seems to fizzle out.
For a long time, we just called it willpower, a sort of moral or personality trait. Either have it or you don't. But what if it's not a trait at all? What if it's a specific mechanical process in the brain, a kind of cognitive strategy that we can actually see and measure?
And that is exactly the territory we are diving into today. It's a really profound piece of research.
It is. We're looking at a 2025 study in translational psychiatry from researchers in Berlin. And what they did was connect a very abstract computational neuroscience concept to messy real-world outcomes over a very long period.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack how a test in a lab, literally watching someone's brain activity while they play a game, can predict with incredible accuracy how well that person can control their own drinking for almost a year.
It boils down to this question. Can we look at the way your brain makes a decision under pressure and use that to forecast whether you'll stick to a personal goal months down the line? The answer they found is a resounding yes, and it sort of redefines what we even mean by self-control.
Okay, so to really get into this, we have to start with the context of the study, which is alcohol use disorder. The source mentions it's one of the most widespread substance use disorders on the planet.
Yeah, the lifetime prevalence is something like 8.6%, which is huge. And the core feature of the disorder is this impaired ability to control your intake, even when you know it's causing problems.
And for decades, the leading theory in psychology about addiction has revolved around this one big idea, this fundamental shift in how the brain makes choices.
Right. The idea is that when someone starts using a substance, it's often, a rational choice. It's goal-directed. You do an action drinking to get a specific outcome relaxation or feeling more social. The action is tied to the expected consequence.
You're doing a kind of cost-benefit analysis, even if it's a quick one.
Exactly. But the theory says that over time, with chronic use, that link breaks. The behavior becomes automatic, it gets stamped in, it shifts from being a choice made for a reason to being, a habit that runs on its own.
Which brings us to the two concepts at the absolute heart of this study. Goal-directed versus habit-driven behavior. We should probably break those down carefully.
Let's start with goal-directed. The scientists also call it model-based behavior, and I think the name is perfect. Your brain is literally using a mental model or a map of the world.
Like a GPS.
Exactly like a GPS. It lets you plan ahead. You think, okay, if I do action A now, I know that will lead me to state B, and state B will have consequence C. It's flexible, it involves thinking about the future, and it's computationally very expensive. The brain has to work hard to do it.
So if I'm trying to be healthy and I see a donut, the model-based system runs a little simulation. It says, eating this now gives me a sugar rush, sure, but that's followed by regret, and it sets back my main goal. The decision is guided by that future outcome.
A perfect example. Now, the opposite of that is habit-driven behavior, or model-free. This is the brain's cheaper, faster route. It doesn't use a map, it just relies on a very simple rule. Last time I did this, I got a reward, so I'll do it again.
It doesn't care about the overall goal, just the immediate reinforcement history.
Precisely. It's like driving your normal route home from work on a Saturday when you fully intended to go to the store. The habit is just so strong it takes over. And for years, the hypothesis was that addiction is just a massive shift toward that automatic model-free system.
But there was a problem with that theory, right? A paradox that this study was trying to solve.
A huge one. When researchers actually tested this and compared people with AUD to people without, they couldn't consistently find a clear difference in their model-based abilities. Sometimes there was no difference at all.
Which is really strange. It kind of undermines the whole theory.
It does. And it suggests that maybe the issue isn't that the goal-directed system is completely broken in people with AUD. Maybe it's still there, but its ability to actually, control behavior is what varies from person to person.
So the researchers in Berlin shifted the question. Instead of asking, is this system broken in AUD? They asked, Within the AUD population, can the strength of this system and its unique brain signals predict who will succeed in controlling their drinking and who won't?
Exactly. They moved from looking for a group-level deficit to looking for a personalized predictive marker. And that changed everything.
Okay, so to do this, they set up this really elegant two-part experiment. You have the assessment in the lab with the brain scanner, and then you have the real-world tracking.
Right. Let's talk about who they studied first. They recruited 67 people diagnosed with AUD, covering a whole range of severity. But the really important part is that these individuals were not actively seeking treatment.
Why is that so important?
Because it means any intention they set to reduce their drinking was completely their own. It was voluntary. So if they managed to stick to it, it was a true measure of their internal self-control, not because a doctor or a program was telling them to.
I see. Okay, so step one, they go into the lab and they're put into an fMRI scanner to do something called the two-step task. This sounds like the engine of the whole study.
It really is. The task is specifically engineered to figure out if your brain is using that forward-planning model-based strategy or the simple reactive model-free one.
So let's walk through it. I think they use a space analogy, which is helpful.
Yes. So imagine you're playing a game. On each turn, you start at stage 1, and you have to choose between two spaceships, let's say ship A and ship B.
And these choices themselves don't give you points or anything, they just take you somewhere.
Correct. They take you to one of two planets at stage 2. But, and this is the key, the transition is probabilistic. It's not guaranteed. If you pick ship A most of the time, say 70% of the time, it takes you to planet X. We call that the common transition.
Okay, so my brain builds a little model. Ship A usually goes to planet X.
Right. But 30% of the time, it does something unexpected. It takes you to planet Y. That's the rare transition. And then once you're on planet X or Y, you make a second choice between two aliens, and that's where you can win or lose points.
And those point values for the aliens are always changing, so I have to keep learning which one is the best bet.
Exactly. Now, here's how this tells us about your strategy. Let's say you pick ship A. And you get a rare transition. It takes you to planet Y. On planet Y, you pick an alien and you get a huge reward. Big win. Now, what do you do on the very next trial?
Well, the last thing I did was pick ship A, and it led to a reward. So the simple part of my brain says, do that again. Pick ship A.
That is the pure model-free response. It just says, action A was rewarded, repeat action A. It completely ignores the fact that it was a rare fluke that got you that reward.
But the model-based system, the planner, would think differently.
The planner thinks, hang on, yes, I got rewarded after picking ship A, but it only took me to that good planet because of a rare 30% chance event. If I pick ship A again, it's highly likely to take me back to planet X, and I remember the rewards on planet X have been terrible lately.
So the planner would actually switch to ship B, even though ship A was the action that just got rewarded.
That's it. It updates its strategy based on its internal map of the whole game, not just the last action. And by analyzing how often people stick or switch after these common versus rare transitions, the researchers can calculate a single number for each person. They call it omega.
And omega is basically a score for how much you rely on that forward planning model-based strategy.
A high omega means you're a planner. A low omega means you're more reactive and habit-driven. But they weren't just looking at the behavior. They were measuring brain activity. Specifically, something called a reward prediction error.
That's the brain's surprise signal, right? The difference between what you expected and what you got.
Yes, but there's a crucial difference here. The standard, simple RPE is model-free. It's like, I pulled the lever and got a treat surprise. That signal just reinforces the action of pulling the lever.
Okay.
What these researchers were looking for was a much more sophisticated signal, a model-based RPE component. This isn't just a signal about the reward, it's a signal that says, my entire map of the game is a little bit wrong and I need to update the whole thing.
And they had a good idea of where in the brain to look for that signal.
They did. They focused on two main areas, the hippocampus and the ventral striatum. The hippocampus is famous for memory and spatial navigation building maps, so it's a prime suspect for model-based planning. And the ventral striatum is a major hub for reward and learning.
So that's the lab part. They get the omega score and the brain activity.
Yeah.
How did they connect that to people's actual lives?
That was step 2. For up to a year on average, 272 days participants used a smartphone app for what's called ecological momentary assessment.
So checking in with them in their day-to-day environment.
Constantly. Every 8 days, they'd get a question. What's your intention for drinking for the next 8 days? And they could say, no specific plan, drink my usual amount, or drink less than usual. So that's the intention.
And then they also had to track what they actually did.
Every 2 days, they reported their alcohol consumption for the previous 2 days. So you have this incredibly detailed long-term record of both their goals and their actual behavior. And the hypothesis was that the data from that 1 day in the lab could predict the patterns in those 272 days of real life.
Okay, so let's get to the findings. What did the behavioral data, that omega score, actually show?
Well, first, it confirmed the paradox. A person's omega score, their planning ability, had nothing to do with how severe their AUD was. And more importantly, it didn't predict how often they set an intention to drink less.
That's a huge point right there. Your ability to plan doesn't determine your desire to change.
Not at all. People set the goal to reduce drinking about a quarter of the time, whether they were good planners or not. Intentions, it turns out, are cheap. But here's the kicker.
This is the rehook.
This is it. That omega score was a powerful moderator. For people with high omega, the good planners, when they set an intention to drink less, they actually did. Their consumption on those weeks was significantly lower. The intention worked.
And for the people with low omega?
For the poor planners, setting the intention had almost no effect on their actual drinking. It's like the intention was there, but the cognitive machinery to implement it just wasn't strong enough to override the habit.
And it's important to stress, this wasn't just about being smarter in general. They controlled for that.
A critical step. They
Yeah.
controlled for things like general working memory and executive function, and the effect of omega remained. This proves that the predictive power comes from this very specific skill of building and using a mental map of consequences, not just overall cognitive ability.
It really isolates the mechanism.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring the brain into it. What did the fMRI data show?
This is where it gets really fascinating. The brain signals from the hippocampus and the ventral striatum added another layer of predictive power. Let's start with the hippocampus. This turned out to be the success signal.
Meaning more activity was better?
More of that specific model-based RPE signal, yes. The stronger that update the map signal was in a person's hippocampus during the task, the better they were at actually reducing their alcohol intake when they intended to.
So the hippocampus is known for helping us navigate physical space, like a new city. Is this study suggesting that navigating toward a long-term goal, like sobriety, uses that same mental map-making machinery?
That is exactly the implication. To achieve a goal that's far off in the future, you have to kind of mentally navigate there. You have to represent that future state in your mind and plan the steps to get there while ignoring all the tempting detours along the way. A strong hippocampal signal means your internal GPS is working really well.
Okay, that makes intuitive sense. A strong planner helps you stay on course. But then there's the finding from the ventral striatum, which you called the challenge signal. And this one was the opposite.
This is the most surprising part of the whole study. In the ventral striatum, a weaker model-based signal was what predicted success.
Wait, so being less sensitive to the planning signals in a key reward area helps you have more self-control. How does that work?
It seems counterintuitive at first, but you have to remember what the ventral striatum, or VS, does. It's a hub for reward and salience. It gets very excited by immediate tempting rewards, that beer is going to be great right now kind of signal.
So it's handling both the simple, immediate reward signals and these more complex planning signals.
Exactly. And the hypothesis here is that if that model-based planning signal is too strong in the VS, it might actually be getting tangled up with or even amplifying the immediate reward cues associated with drinking. It might make the temptation more salient.
I think I see. So a quieter model-based signal in that specific region means there's less interference. It's like the immediate reward system isn't getting as involved in the long-term planning process.
That's a great way to put it. It allows the pure long-term plan from the hippocampus to guide behavior without as much static from the immediate reward system. So for good self-control, you need a loud, clear signal from your planner, the hippocampus, and a relatively quiet reward sensor, the VS, during that planning phase.
And when you put all three of these predictors together, the behavior, the hippocampus signal, and the VS signal, the effect was pretty dramatic.
It was. Let's make it concrete. They ran a simulation comparing a person with the ideal profile, strong hippocampus signal, weak VS signal, to a person with the absolute worst profile.
And the difference in their actual drinking.
The person with the strong planner profile drank an estimated 17.52 grams less alcohol on the days they were trying to cut back.
17.5 grams. That's more than a standard drink. Every single day they tried. based on a brain scan from months earlier. That is truly incredible predictive power.
And it gets better. They found this effect was mostly driven by the ability to achieve complete abstinence on a given day. It wasn't just about drinking a little less. It was about the ability to say 0 today. That goal-directed system is what allows you to make that clean break.
So, okay, the predictive power is amazing. But the real value here is what this means for actually helping people. This feels like it moves us beyond just labeling a disorder and toward diagnosing the specific point of failure.
That's the paradigm shift. It's about personalizing treatment. If we can figure out why someone is struggling with self-control, is it a problem with building the plan, or is it a problem with the reward system hijacking the plan, then we can tailor the therapy directly to that mechanism.
So let's imagine two people walk into a clinic. They both get assessed with a task like this. What would their different treatment paths look like?
Okay, let's take patient A. They show high model-based behavior. Their omega is high, their hippocampus is firing away. Fundamentally, they are a good planner. They can see the long-term consequences.
But they're still struggling to control their drinking.
Right. Their problem isn't the planning machinery itself. It's probably more about execution and managing the environment. So for them, you'd focus on cognitive interventions.
Like what specifically?
Things like helping them set very concrete, manageable goals, doing a lot of contingency planning. Okay, when you go to that party on Friday, what is the exact plan? It's about giving their already good planning system the support it needs to work in high-risk situations.
You're not trying to rewire their brain. You're just giving their existing system better tools and a better environment to operate in.
You got it. Now, patient B is the opposite. They have low model-based behavior. Their omega is low, their planning signals are weak. For them, just talking about long-term consequences and making plans is probably not going to be very effective.
Because the underlying cognitive equipment to do that consistently just isn't there or isn't strong enough.
Exactly. So telling them to try harder is pointless. With them, you need to first address the deep, automatic, maladaptive learning processes. You have to weaken the habit itself.
And how do you do that?
The sources mention a few things. You could use virtual reality cue exposure, where you put them in a virtual bar, for instance, surrounded by all the triggers, but without letting them drink. Over time, that can weaken the automatic association. Or even more advanced things like reconsolidation-based therapies, which are designed to directly disrupt the memory trace that links the cue to the reward.
So that's step 1, weaken the habit.
And step 2 is to then give them interventions designed to actively strengthen their goal-directed system. This could be cognitive training games that force them to do complex forward planning tasks. It's about rebuilding that planning infrastructure from the ground up.
It really is 2 completely different approaches to treatment based on one initial computational diagnosis.
And it highlights this beautiful idea of the competition in the brain. The hippocampus is quietly trying to map out the long, winding road to health. The ventral striatum is shouting about the shortcut that leads directly to an immediate reward. Success is about making sure the planner's voice is the one you follow.
And this research gives us a way to measure how loud each of those voices is for a specific person, and then a strategy for how to adjust the volume. Now, as groundbreaking as this study is, we have to be critical. Any scientific method has its limitations. Let's talk about the task they used, the task specificity.
Right. The 2-step task is fantastic for measuring that model-based planning ability. But some critics argue it's not the best way to measure a true ingrained habit.
What do they mean by that?
A real deep habit is thought to be almost completely independent of the outcome. You do it in response to a cue, even if you don't really want the reward anymore. The 2-step task, however, is all about learning from rewards and punishments.
I see. So it's measuring one side of the coin, the goal-directed side really well, but maybe not the purely habitual side.
And the study acknowledges that. Its focus is on goal-directed control. To really get a picture of the automatic habit system, you'd need to use other methods, like outcome devaluation tasks. It's a different question for a different study.
There's also the issue of model complexity. We're trying to fit complex human behavior into these 2 neat little boxes, model-free or model-based. But people are probably more complicated than that.
Oh, absolutely. The authors are very clear that these models are a simplification. In reality, people might use strategies that are somewhere in between. Future research is already looking at more nuanced algorithms, like something called successor representation.
What's that in simple terms?
Think of it as a middle ground. It's not as simple as the habit-based system, but it's not as complex as the full GPS-style map. It's a more flexible hybrid. approach. And using those more advanced models might give us an even clearer picture of what the brain is doing.
And of course, the big one for any study like this, causality. They measured the brain first and then predicted behavior later.
Which is great for showing predictive power. We know that goal-directed ability comes before the successful control, but we have to be careful not to say it causes it. It's an association.
Right. It could be that some other third factor, maybe a genetic or neurochemical predisposition, is causing both the strong planning ability and the better self-control.
It's possible. So to get to causality, the next generation of studies needs to go from observing to intervening.
How would they do that?
They need to find ways to actively manipulate these systems in real life. Maybe use neurofeedback to see if you can train someone to boost their hippocampal signal, and then check if that directly increases their chance of staying abstinent that same day. You have to close the loop.
So can we train that inner planner to be louder and more resilient in the face of temptation? That seems to be the billion-dollar question.
That's it. And to figure that out, we need to keep refining these tasks, making them more specific to substance use, and really continue to pull apart the distinct jobs of the hippocampus and the ventral striatum in this constant battle between the long-term goal and the immediate reward. #shag outro. When you take a step back from all the details, what this deep dive really shows is that we're moving into a new era of understanding self-control. It's not just a fuzzy concept anymore. We have a computational framework to understand why it differs so much from person to person.
And it tells you that sticking to a hard goal isn't really about some abstract virtue called willpower. It's about a very real, very physical interplay between different systems in your brain. And success or failure often comes down to just the relative strengths of those different neural signals.
Which should actually give you a lot of hope. Because if the ability to follow through is rooted in a mechanical brain system, the same one you use to plan a road trip, then we have a target. We have something we can potentially identify, measure, and even train.
And that leaves us with, I think, a really interesting final thought. If your self-control depends on how well your brain navigates through time toward a future goal, what could you be doing right now to strengthen that internal map? What kind of mental exercises or digital tools could help you make that hippocampal planning function more robust?
It suggests that maybe the answer isn't always to fight temptation head-on, but to get better at the quiet background work of planning and forecasting, making that distant goal feel more concrete and more achievable. The future of self-improvement might be less about motivation and more about, well, cognitive navigation.
A fascinating idea to think about as you look at your own goals and your own strategies for execution. That's all the time we have for this deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.